Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso maham jyotirgamaya mrityormam amritam gamaya avir ahavir maedhi rudra yate dakshinam mukham te namaham pa inityam. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is, what language does God speak? And we're going to be talking about the mantra, shastra, and about religious language. To address the question, we can remember that God spoke to Abraham in ancient times and told him to sacrifice his son Isaac. God spoke to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai when Moses asked him, "What is your name?" God replied in ancient Hebrew, "I am that I am." We know too that God spoke to Sri Ramakrishna on one occasion at a period in which he was immersed, preoccupied with many gods and goddesses and ecstatic samadhis, oblivious of the world. One day, walking on the way to the pine grove, he tripped and he fell and he broke his arm. And you can still see in some of the photos a little evidence of that mishap. But on that occasion, he heard the voice of the Divine Mother telling him, "You have incarnated as a man. I dwell in men. Be happy with men." In other words, get your mind out ahead of the clouds and see God in everything around you. We know too, on another occasion, in the life of Swami Vedarupananda, traveling in North India, he left the group and went on alone to visit a very old shrine to the goddess Kshir Bhavani. And it so happened that that shrine had been, and that temple with its sacred spring had been demolished. It was just kind of the ruins. And there he sat and meditated. And he thought in his mind, "Oh, Mother, if I had been here in those ancient times, then I would not have let this have happened to you." And then he heard the voice of the Divine Mother saying, "My child, do you protect me, or do I protect you?" So we see here God speaking in ancient Hebrew, in Bengali, in English. And we think, does he speak to everyone maybe in their own language? We know in the French Academy of Languages lists that there's 1,700 and some odd languages in the world, all of them distinct, with just having a distinct grammar and vocabulary, not just different dialects. And so maybe God always speaks in your own language. And yet we know too that maybe that's not always the case, because we remember how in Sri Ramakrishna was in the Kali temple, and he entered into a state of ecstasy, and he heard the voice of the Divine Mother addressing him, saying, "Do you want to be Akshara?" Now, Akshara is a Sanskrit word, and Ramakrishna didn't speak Sanskrit. So he was baffled. He didn't know what she meant. He went back to his room and he asked a devotee, asked Haladari, "Explain to me, what does she mean?" And then he told him about the Akshara, the unmanifest, asking him, "Do you want to be in a high state of samadhi?" So the question then would be, what is our question? Well, we can't. When we think about this, we can't help but recall that parable of Sri Ramakrishna about the washerman who served as a dyer of clothes, and he'd set up his shop, and people would come with their cloths and would line up there, and he had a big tub of dye, and one person would come with he had a white dhoti, maybe cloth, hand it to the washerman. He would dip it in the tank. He said, "What color would you want?" I want it red." He'd pull it out, it's red. "Oh, thank you very much." He'd go on his way. Next person come in, dip that. "What color do you want your cloth?" "Blue." "Good." He dips it in that tank. Pulls out the cloth, it's blue. "Well, thank you very much." Like this, there was a passerby who was watching this, and he thought, how strange, how curious. And so he went and got in line, holding his cloth. And when it came his turn to have it dyed, he asked the washerman, he said, "Please dye my cloth the color of the dye that's in your vat." So he was curious about, what is this magic dye that appears in many different colors? Well, we're asking our question this morning about the primordial language, maybe the first language of mankind, or the divine language. And it's an idea, a concept it's held by all the cultures of the world, different versions of the story. And well, we know how in the Garden of Eden, God created Adam and Eve and then spoke to them, instructing them on how to live. And Adam, using that language, named all of the animals. And then they had their family. And Adam lived for 900 years. So he lived through a lot of different generations, generation after generation. Everyone's speaking the language, communities, time passed. They came up to the time of Noah. And Noah, as you know, God spoke to Noah, told him to build the ark. And people boarded the ark, those fortunate few. And after the flood, which washed away everything on the earth, the ark landed, and the people that were there came off, and they journeyed on to a place that was today is called Babylon in Iraq. And there they settled, and the time passed, It grew from families to communities, the whole city. And one day somebody had a bright idea that they would build a tower that would go up to heaven. And isn't that a good idea? We just we'll build level after level. We put in an elevator there. We just get in there. We go right up to heaven. Yes, that's very good. So people started working on that. Hundreds of workmen, thousands of workmen, day and night they would work, and so it began to rise. Level by level by level, it went up story by story. And everything was going along very efficiently and very well because everyone was communicating very efficiently. Well, God, meanwhile, up in the heavens, sitting on a cloud, he looked over one day, and what did he see? He saw a tower coming up into the clouds. And he felt, his feeling was, well, he felt vexed. He felt, what the arrogance and the chutzpah of these people that to build a tower. And so he casually tipped it over, and the tower came tumbling down. And then God came down, and he scrambled all the languages so that one person could understand what the others were saying, and then dispersed all of those people in different parts of the earth. And so here we are today. This is our condition today. We're all living speaking different languages. And to the extent that we can't communicate with others, we have difficulties and problems. And so it is that the divine language kind of was degraded and diversified. And, well, in ancient India, they never had this problem, this kind of a question, what language did God speak? Because they had a very definitive answer. They believed that the original language of mankind was Sanskrit. And it makes sense, because just as we know that all of the different English languages are like we know the Romance languages, the French and Italian, and the Spanish, all can be traced back to Latin. Similarly, in India, all those languages, or most of them anyhow, in India, can be traced back to Sanskrit. And therefore, Sanskrit, or rather Vedic, we could say, maybe a primordial form of the classical Sanskrit, was regarded as the original language. In fact, it was regarded as the divine language. And it was called the divine language because the very sounds were derived from the Lord Shiva in his cosmic dance. He beats the time with the drum of the damaru, and the sound of the tuk-tuk on the damaru begins to replicate some of the syllables in the phonetic alphabet. And so we have the alphabet. And we know the script is called Devanagari. That means it came from the city of the gods. And we know that the scriptures, which were the rishis, which were revealed to the rishis, that is the revelation from on high, the divine word of God revealed to the saints and sages and appearing in the form of the scriptures, was in this ancient Vedic language. And so this was the ancient, the original language. And we could say was the divine language. And well, we look at Sanskrit, and you can see that in fact, it is amazing in many ways and of interest to modern linguists because of its intense rational and scientific structure. And one thing about in Sanskrit is that we can look the words into a word. We can see that those words are transparent. That is, if we look into an English word, likely as not, we don't know, we can't see the etymology. We don't know the whole history of the word. We may know what the dictionary definition is, but we don't know how it was formed or how it developed or where it came from. Whereas in a Sanskrit word, you just look at it and you don't have to even be a linguist. You can immediately see that it's the prefixes and the affixes and the stem derived from a root sound. So all this becomes immediately clear that all language is derived from roots, from root primordial sounds. And that we don't mean the stem of the word. We mean kind of just like the word Vedanta. Vedanta, the stem there is Veda, but the root is Vid. It's just a single syllable, and it's they've classified maybe 600 of these basic primordial root sounds. Now, in ancient India, teleport ourselves back 3,000 years ago. In the first yogis, the meditators, the ascetics, living maybe in a forest. And maybe it's, maybe they built a dhuni fire to keep themselves warm. And they were very interested in sound and in subtle, not just natural sounds, but in subtle sounds. And we can imagine in the quiet of the night, you're sitting there, maybe you can hear the crackling of the fire, and you can hear the rustling of the leaves in the trees. Maybe you could hear the sounds even of a very small animal, footsteps of a little animal that's moving there and behind you. Those are subtle sounds. But there are other sounds which are beyond the range of human hearing. That is, maybe we could say you couldn't hear, maybe you could feel your heartbeat, but you really couldn't say you could hear your heart. Certainly you can't hear the sound of the blood that's rushing through your arteries and veins. And you certainly can't hear the sound of electrons as they whirl around and around the nucleus of an atom. These are causal sounds. This was their interest. Now here we can look here at two principles of the mantra shastra. That means now we're getting into the philosophy, or maybe we can't call it a philosophy, of the tradition of Tantra. It's a tradition that runs parallel. It's not Vedanta. It's a tradition that has their own scriptures and that kind of runs parallel to this Vedanta philosophy. But they have ideas which maybe some of you will recognize. One of the principles there is that everything in the world is composed of moving material forces. And everything that moves makes a sound. Now we can see that just in our own experience in terms of gross audible sounds, but maybe we've never thought about subtle sounds or causal sounds. But everything that moves makes a sound. And that sound is it's not a dog barking. That's not what it means. It means that it's the actual sound of the whole animal has a sound associated with it. We call it the natural name of that object. So if we're talking about a plant, we're talking about an animal, it has a natural name that is a sound vibration that goes with it, that will evoke that thing in itself. We could call it a mantra. A mantra is a natural name that evokes the presence of an object or of a person. Now that's one principle, that everything has a signature sound. Everything has its own name. Once a man asked a little girl, little girl with her dog. He said, "What's the name of your dog?" And she said, "I don't know. We call him Fido." See, she kind of understood that was not his real name. That's what we call him, but that he has his own natural name. Okay, that's one principle. Now, there's another principle that, and that is that sound, vibration is related to form, to forms and structure of an object. You remember there was a German mathematician who did a lot of experiments with music and with sounds. His name was Chladni. And he had a famous experiment where he had a disc, a metal disc, very thin metal plate. And on that, he scattered sand. And then taking the bow, as you would play a violin, he rubbed the edge of that plate with the bow, and the plate began to vibrate. And as it vibrated, the form, the sand shifted and settled into patterns and into shapes and different forms. And when he played, when he drew the bow and to a different tempo or in a different manner, then the shapes would change. And so what we have here is a connection here between the name and the form. The form means the structure of a thing. Now this is a famous term in the study of philosophy, goes way back before the Buddhist period even. That is the term nama rupa. That means name and form. Everything in this world is nothing but name and form. That's the theory. And for example, if you were a yogi in the Himalayas and it was cold and it was snowing and it was ice everywhere, then how could you live there? How could you keep warm? Well, if you just close your eyes and you sit for meditation and you meditate on the Agni, the god of the fire, and you evoke Agni with his natural name, then you can draw around you a ring of fire. And thus, they were able to keep warm in those mountain caves, even during the cold of the Himalayas. We know one of the sayings, which maybe you've heard, in the tradition of the Tantra, it says, the mantra of the Devata is the Devata. Now, to our ear, that sounds a little difficult, because we're used to thinking of a person. The name of a person is not the person. It may refer to the person, but here the thesis is the name of the Devata is the Devata. And you remember how in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, there was Sri Krishna is sporting with the gopis in Vrindavan. And they're all laughing and having fun, and they have a big scale, pans, a weighted scale. And there are different pans. So Sri Krishna asks the gopis, which one of you values me the most, appreciates me the most? He says, let me just sit here in this one of these scales and see if you can find something which balances my being. And one of the devotees, one of the gopis there, Satyabhama, she immediately said, yes, I can do that. She went and she got some gold bars and their jewels, came back with that heavy bag of precious metals and put it on that other side of the scale, and nothing happened. And everyone was looking around, and then Rukmini, another gopi, said, let me try. So she went, she got a tulsi leaf, and on that tulsi leaf, she wrote the name of Krishna. And then taking that single leaf alone, put it on the scale, and lo and behold, the scales went up and balanced the body, person of Krishna seated on the other side. The name and the form, they are the same. Now, it may seem to us that's a little problematic. Where did that idea come from? That idea came from an old ancient school of Indian philosophy. It's called Shabda Advaita. And you know the word Advaita, non-dualism. But here it doesn't really mean non-dualism. It means monism. That is, there's only one substance in the whole universe is all one substance. And but it's called Shabda Advaita. That means that substance is sound. Now, in the beginning, there was Brahman. Brahman is the cause, the source, from which everything arises, that by which everything is maintained, and into which everything returns at the end. And what is the nature of Brahman? Brahman is nada. That means sound. It's sound vibration. You've heard this idea about vibration. This is not a new age hippie idea, but it goes back into the most ancient times. Everything in the beginning, yadidam kincha, jagat sarvam, prana, ajati, nisritam. In the beginning, everything is primordial energy. And in the energy moves the primordial matter. And in the beginning, all is nothing but vibration. And the whole universe is different frequencies of levels, the whole spectrum of vibration. And everything from the gross goes from the very subtlest down to the very grossest, heaviest, slowest wavelengths and frequencies. Everything is vibration. This is the idea. Swami, who's talking out there? Hello? Oh. Oh, they're on the trail. Maybe they're enjoying the shrine trail. That's vibration. But everything in the vibration, you see, if you go to the grossest level, here we are in the grossest level of vibration. If we were to go to subtler and subtler levels, we would come to, we're talking now about sound vibration. We'd come to the subtlest movement, which could be captured by a sound, that is, by a word. A sound here means a unit of sound is a word. And the word the subtlest of all vibration is called Om. That's the name of God. That's the natural name of Brahman. And now we may be very familiar with that idea. That is, that there is a word that was at the very beginning of creation, that lies there at the very root and the source of all creation. Because we know from reading the book of St. John that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is, the name and the form are the same. This is the idea of this school of tantric school of thought, which is called Shabda, that is sound monism, just to give you a philosophy. But let's just look here at the word now. We're talking here about the beginning was the word. The word in ancient Greek was logos. And the logos is the principle of all, that is, it's the rational principle which is at the source of everything. It's the source of the logos. The logos of a particular thing is the rational unifying principle of that thing. That's its logos. And just like that's a word, just like a word, you know, every word in the dictionary does not name a particular thing. It's names a class of things. That is, it's a unifying concept. It's a concept that unifies many, many particular things are called by this name. That's a word. So the word here with a capital W, the one word, at the beginning there was one word, that is one vibration. And, well, we know too that in the beginning, the one became the many. Now the one here, as we're conceiving it in this discussion, is one unified whole. In the beginning, there is a whole. There's one. That is monism. That's monism. That means there's just one entity. That is Brahman. Think of it as to use a Southern California metaphor, a pomegranate. Think of a ripe pomegranate. And that pomegranate is so ripe that it's about ready to burst. And when it bursts open, that is the Logos. Out come the hundred, may thousand little seeds that are just replicants of the thing. It's like the mother and the children. And it's about the Logos then appears as the Logoi. The Logoi. That is all the different rational principles which are behind everything in the universe. Now, in Platonic philosophy, that is in Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism, that is early Christianity, is going to interpret these logoi as thoughts in the mind of God. So what are these logoi? They're God's thoughts. And God has, so the idea now we're talking here about the sum total of the omniscience of God. And all of these, well, we could ask ourselves, what does that mean? What is the content of God's mind? The content of God's mind, we think we would understand. It must contain the source of everything that we know. That everything must eventually have its source from that higher consciousness. And so we could say that in that mind there are universal spiritual laws. There are natural laws, the sum total of scientific principles, the principles of mathematics. All of these things we have to presuppose. This is a metaphysical argument. That is, we have presupposed that they exist. Otherwise, we can't make sense out of the world and the way we think. These laws exist. Where do they exist? Well, in Christianity, they exist in the mind of God. Maybe in Vedanta would say, or yoga psychology would say, that they exist within our own mind, that is deep within our own psyche as innate ideas that enable us to make sense of the world. So whether it exists in God's mind or in our own unconscious, there they are. And they would include also all of those perfect, ideal, eternal things in themselves. That is, not particular things, but perfect things. Perfect, ideal things. Their essences. Everything has an essence. Where are those essences? The essence is in the mind of God. That is, the essences, the natural kinds, the properties, the relations, abstract objects, everything in the dictionary. These are all referring to ideal, abstract concepts, forms of things in themselves that exist or subsist or are real. If you don't want to say they exist in space and they're beyond space and time. But of course now yoga psychology tells you there's different levels of space and time. So we have the Mahakasha, then we have the Chittakasha, the Chidakasha. So it's beyond, we could say it's beyond gross and subtle space. In any case, this is the contents of God's mind. And it is these logoi, that is these ideas, that God uses as stereotypes and archetypes and blueprints to create the world. These are all natural names. Every one of these things is a name. It's a mantra. It's a sound vibration, and it's a thing. It's a form. It's a name and a form. Now let's look here at how God creates the world. You know, God, the creator of this world, his name is Brahma. He arose as the first among the gods, but he became a god. He was a person, just like you and I, but he was a great yogi, and he rose and became the foremost of all the yogis. And at the end of the cycle, he was promoted to this position in the next cycle. That was his job. He became the official creator of the world. And so he, at the beginning of the cycle, Brahma appeared meditating on a lotus, floating on an ocean of milk, the infinite ocean. And Brahma, he knew, somehow he felt that he was here, that he was here to create the world. But he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know what to do. Because when you create something, Brahma creates the world like a potter creates a pot. In order for a potter to create a pot, he has to think of a pot. That's called the formative cause. In order to think of a pot, you have to evoke the image, you have to evoke the idea of a pot by calling it by its name. You have to think pot, and then a pot will appear. That's why Brahma needs to have a wife. His wife is Saraswati, who is the goddess of knowledge and is also called Vak, that is the ancient Vedic goddess of speech and of language. It is Vak who whispers the words of the Vedas into his ear. Now he has the words, and with the word he can call forth the idea, and with the idea now he can say, "Let there be light," and there will be light. Bur Bhuva Swaha Swaha goes. There's the earth, there's the heavens. The earth, the heavens, and the inner space appear. This is creation through the word. So God created this world. And so we have the workings here of the divine language in everything that we see. So this goes back to the old ancient times, this tantric school, a little different from Vedanta. Maybe you recognize some of the ideas. It also goes back to Platonic philosophy. Plato had a beautiful vision about the world. He said that this world is twofold. That is, there is a lower world and there is a higher world. And between the two, there is the famous Platonic image of the dividing line. Below is the apparent. Above is the real. Below is ignorance. Above is knowledge. Below is the changing. Above is the changeless, eternal. Like that, there's two different worlds. We live in the world, the apparent world, the visible world. It's the world of the senses. We perceive things through the senses and through the ego mind, colored by desire and by our conditioning, and therefore we see through a glass darkly. We perceive this lower world, that is this world of change, of evolution, where everything is in flux, and where a flower may sprout and grow and blossom and bloom, and over there it is a beautiful red rose. But very soon that the beauty fades and the flower dries up and dies away. And so it is with everything. Everything comes and goes. It's a world of flux. This is the lower world. This is the world of shadows, where we can't see things clearly. We see everything in reflection, everything through representation or copies. We're living in ignorance, that is, in spiritual ignorance of our own true nature, of the higher reality. And therefore we perceive this world as we do. We live in the world of avidya maya. Avidya means spiritual ignorance. And maya just means the illusion of this world that we see. This is the lower world, the world of avidya maya. But there is a higher world. It's a world, by a higher world, what do we mean? We mean we're pointing here to a world of ideals. A world of ideal, perfect, eternal principles, like truth, goodness, and beauty. And truth reflects things as they really are, in accord, see as things as they are, things in themselves. And goodness shows us what is moral, what is ethical, what is spiritual, how to live. And beauty gives us some deeper inspiration to live our lives. And the idea is that the ideal of personal growth is to orient ourselves to these higher principles and to live in accord with reason and with truth, and to act in accord with moral and ethical principles and compassion, and to appreciate the beauty in the world around us, even though things may appear to be less than perfect. This is the world of avidya, the world of vidya maya. Is knowledge, the knowledge world. Vedanta, now I'm using Vedantic terminology. In the end, both avidya and the vidya, the lower and the higher worlds, will disappear like smoke in the air, or like a dream. It disappears, vanishes like an illusion when we attain the enlightenment. That is when we realize the absolute Brahman, which is one only without a second. But until that time, of our enlightenment, that is, until that time, we can work to raise our consciousness, to raise our level of vibration, and to move from ignorance to knowledge to wisdom, to living and walking in the Spirit, and to follow and take as our guide the Word of God, because the Word of God is like a lamp that will lead us to enlightenment. Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Ham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantiredhi Om Shanti 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 Om. Peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.